Don't do debt consolidation. It's a scam. You will get sued. Do not trust any debt consolidation company. They take all of their fees up front, and never do a debt consolidation program. You will have a huge tax obligation. Those are actually very common reviews from people who have gone through a debt consolidation program. So today I'm actually going to reveal whether any of that's actually true and whether debt consolidation is actually a scam. Now, one thing, please make sure to stay until the end of the video, as I'm actually going to give you a secret weapon that you can use to actually get ahead of your debt. So let's dive right into it. Welcome to the Ascend Finance YouTube channel, where we help people understand whether debt consolidation is a legitimate option, as well as help folks understand their options so they can get out of debt cheaper, easier, and faster. Today, I'm actually going to answer the big question of whether debt consolidation is a scam for informational purposes only. Debt consolidation programs, also known as debt settlement programs, are where a negotiation company will work with your creditors directly to settle past due debts. So in short, the process is where you're offering settlements to creditors for less than the balance owed, since the debt is past due. Now, I'm going to come back to this, but the key thing to remember here is the fact that they are settling and lowering balances on past due debt, okay? Okay, so before I address each of the most common horror stories I mentioned in the beginning, I feel like it could be helpful for you to understand the process of settling debt. Basically, in order to settle with a creditor, the debt needs to be past due. If you call a creditor when you're only 30 days behind, they may only offer you maybe an interest rate reduction plan, but not a settlement on the balance. Now, after around 4 to 6 months of no payments on an account, a creditor may actually charge that account off. That's where the creditor is essentially writing the debt off internally, so that they're now assuming they're not going to actually get paid for it anymore. Now, the debt is still 100% collectible, and you still indeed owe the debt, but that's typically the green light to settle, as they're willing to take something rather than nothing at this point, right? So with all that in mind, if you fall behind on the debt, the creditor may have the right to file a debt collection lawsuit to collect the debt. Also, when you make a settlement on a debt, you may receive a 1099-C from the creditor showing the debt has been forgiven. Now, I'm going to cover how both of those things work shortly, but I just kind of wanted to give you some sort of high-level overview for now. So let's first address, don't do debt consolidation. It's a scam. You're going to get sued. Well, yes, you can get sued, but that doesn't make it a scam. Basically, what's most likely happened to someone feeling this way is that they signed up with the debt consolidation company and it wasn't clearly communicated that a lawsuit can happen. Companies might say something like, oh, we have a legal protection plan that's, you know what, it's already included in the program, so if you're sued, we have an attorney to handle that. Although most of the time, they fail to mention that the legal protection plan actually costs extra, and it doesn't mean you can't get sued. Honestly, I could put an entire video together on why I don't feel like legal protection plans are worth anything, but if that's something you're curious about, maybe just leave a comment down below for me and I'll maybe make a video about that. Keep in mind, if you're considering doing a debt consolidation program, you're likely already falling behind or going to have to fall behind. Now, if you're not falling behind or feeling like you have to fall behind, there are actually other options to lower your payments and get ahead. Like, for example, nonprofit credit counseling. I've done actually some videos going over how that can keep up to date with your payments while lowering your payments and interest rates without a loan and missing any payments. So check them out if you're interested, but essentially, let's get back to the point here. At the end of the day, companies might not actually do a good job of communicating the risk of lawsuit. So when a client gets a lawsuit and they get sued, I can totally understand how they may feel like they were scammed. But that doesn't really mean that a debt consolidation as a process is a scam. It just means they worked with a company who didn't do potentially a good job of communicating the risks. Now, thankfully, I will say I do know some good ones that actually communicate the risks before you sign up. Okay, so let's look at the next common horror story. It's don't trust any debt consolidation company. They take fees up front. So this is always an interesting one to read, as technically debt settlement companies are very, very regulated in how they're allowed to take their fees. Now, in short, years and years and years ago, some debt settlement companies were basically charging people upfront fees and then not doing the labor, which is insane to me. But either way, there was legislation put through to prevent this from happening. And so now a debt settlement company cannot collect their fee for settling a specific account unless the first payment has been made to the creditor. Now, there's a good chance that does not make a whole lot of sense to some people, so let me simplify this. The way debt settlement companies charge a fee is a percentage of the amount of debt you enroll. Oftentimes, companies charge around 25%, although sometimes higher. So for example, if you enroll, let's say $10,000 worth of debt into a program and that company is charging you 25%, then you will eventually owe them $2,500 in fees after they've reached settlements on all of your accounts. So what they'll do is actually lump their fees into the monthly payment you're making, as that payment is literally just a deposit into a special purpose bank account where funds are essentially being saved up for settlements. So their fees will just sit in there until they've actually reached a settlement and made the first payment to that creditor. Then once that's been done, they can go into that bank account and draft out 25% in this example of the balance that they just settled. That said, like I mentioned earlier, I actually do know some companies that actually charge less than 25%, so I'll plan to include a link in the description so you can find the best consolidation company out there, as I've honestly spent a ton of time vetting and finding reputable companies in the industry. So if you're already behind on your debt or see that you have no choice but to fall behind soon, then check out the best consolidation company finder in the description below. It'll present you with typically one or more options based on your actual zip code. Okay, so coming back to addressing the concern of taking fees upfront. As you now know, debt settlement companies are very regulated and are not allowed to take anything upfront without reaching a settlement. So you may be thinking, well, that person is just angry then. There's no chance they took upfront fees because they are not allowed to. Who knows if you sound like that, but if you do, that's cool. So if you're thinking that, you're not actually 100% wrong, but you're also not 100% correct. You're right because they're probably angry, as they most likely feel misled. You're also right that they're not allowed to take upfront fees. That said, I have seen something that can happen where it feels like a loophole to taking fees upfront. Now, I want to strongly premise that this is not something I see every single day or with every single company out there. I've seen it a few times and I've done this for almost 6 years now, so it's not an incredibly common thing, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen more than I actually see. So all of that said, I've seen where some companies will reach a settlement for somebody, make a $1 payment to the creditor for that settlement, and then take thousands of dollars out of the special purpose bank account. And then they're going to reach out to the client asking for them to increase their payment amount because there isn't enough to make the next payment to the creditor. Now, there's a good chance that didn't make any sense for some folks, so let me visualize this for you. Let's say there is a guy named Fred who's in a program and he enrolled $10,000 worth of debt into the program and has been making a $200 a month payment for the last 6 months. So that would assume there's now $1,200 sitting in that special purpose bank account right now. Now, Fred has one account with a balance of $4,500. So in this example, let's say the company's charging him 25%. So when they settle that $4,500 account, they will actually have earned $1,125 worth of fees. So what I've seen happen here is the company will reach a settlement for Fred on that, let's say $4,500 account. And let's just say that settlement is $250 a month for 9 months. So that would assume they got a 50% settlement, meaning they got the balance reduced by half, right? So then the debt settlement company would then make a $1 payment to the creditor and then take $1,125 from the bank account. So now there's only $75 left in there. So Fred is depositing $200 a month with the program he has, but he now has to pay $250 a month for the next 9 months for that specific settlement. So with what Fred had saved up, that $1,200 in the escrow account, the debt settlement company could actually make payments for that account they just settled for a handful of months because he's depositing $200. They just need to take $50 extra a month from that special purpose bank account to get to $250, and so they can make the payments to the creditors for those 9 months. The challenge is when the company takes $1,125 out of that bank account, they basically don't have enough money to cover the payment to the creditor anymore. So what happens is then the debt settlement company calls Fred and is like, hey, you have that $250 a month settlement we got you, but there isn't enough funds in the bank account, so could you increase your draft amount by $50 a month for the next 9 months? So hopefully we're all now on the same page, but basically the company isn't technically charging upfront fees as they technically did reach a settlement. However, they prioritize taking their fees over making payments to the creditor. They could have taken their fees over 1 to 3 months to help make sure there's always enough room and money to make sure there's a payment, but they specifically only paid $1 for the first payment so they could take everything they were owed out of that account. So with all that being said, yes, it's incredibly frustrating to see this, but I'm going to leave it up to you on whether you feel like that's actually a scam. Now, debt consolidation itself isn't, but doing practices like that can feel deceptive, so I can understand why people feel that way. Now, the one time I do see companies taking fees upfront is in a program called debt validation. Now, I'm seeing companies that are basically telling people that they will validate their debt and get it wiped away for a fraction of what actual debt settlement companies can do. What's happening is they're making the program sound like a debt settlement program. But in the agreement people sign, they explicitly state that they are not a debt settlement program and that clients are hiring them to validate their debt, which frankly does literally nothing if you indeed owe the debt. I mean, you can do this yourself for free with free letter generators that we've literally made ourselves, or other people that have made them on the internet as well. This is where I've seen companies actually make upfront fees without doing any settlements because the clients are paying for their debt validation services, not to settle debt. Honestly, there's so much to unpack here with debt validation companies, so if you want me to cover a video on that, let me know in the comments below. Okay, thank you guys for sticking with me so far. I want to cover one last common horror story, which is never do a debt consolidation program. You're going to have a huge tax obligation. Now, I want to lead with, I am by no means a tax expert. However, I do want to share what I believe to understand so you can better understand how it works with debt settlement specifically. As I shared earlier, when a settlement is made, you may receive a 1099-C from the creditor reporting the cancellation of that debt. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you now owe taxes from that. From how I understand it, it more so comes down to tax solvency. Now, tax solvency, as explicitly stated on the IRS's website, states that a taxpayer is insolvent when his or her total liabilities exceed his or her total assets. The forgiven debt may be excluded as income under the insolvency exclusion. So what that tells you is that if you're considered insolvent, meaning you have more liabilities than assets, then you may not actually have to count the forgiven debt as taxable income. However, if you do have more assets than liability, which I would say is honestly less common to happening if you're considering a debt settlement program, but regardless, if that's the case, then you may have to count the forgiven debt as taxable income, and then you may actually have a tax obligation from that. So now that we all understand that better, to address that horror story head on, there is a strong chance that someone saying something like that wasn't clearly communicated about how tax obligations can happen. Further, they happen to be someone who maybe had more assets than liabilities, so they ended up having to owe taxes because of the settlement program. Okay, let's come to a close. I'm going to answer the question of whether debt consolidation is a scam, as well as leave you with 3 questions to ask a debt settlement company in the sales call if you're considering that option. So no, debt consolidation itself isn't a scam. However, I can understand how people feel that way. It naturally, honestly comes from a lack of transparency from the debt settlement company that they signed up with in the first place. Essentially, what happens is someone who had never had a plan of falling behind was convinced to sign up for debt settlement through maybe deceptive marketing or sales practices, and then ends up getting sued or something else entirely and is now incredibly frustrated and blames debt consolidation itself as a whole, but not actually the company. So no, it's not a scam, but please do your research and make sure you're finding an option that actually makes sense for your situation, including doing research on the company you're considering signing up with. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to plan to include a link in the description so you can find the best consolidation company out there, as I've honestly spent a lot of time vetting and finding reputable companies in the industry. So again, if you're already behind on debt or see that you have no choice but to fall behind, please check out the best consolidation company finder. It's in the description below. It's going to present you with either one or more different options based on your actual zip code. Now, if you're not really sure which option actually makes sense for you, you can take our best debt options calculator. It's linked below as well. It'll break down the costs, pros and cons, and an estimated good fit for each option. That way you can understand which options make the most sense for you, and that way you can make the most informed decision. So to close this video out, as I'm sure you're tired of hearing my voice as I am as well, here are 3 questions to ask a debt settlement company in the sales call. First, asking them, how much are you going to charge me in fees? They should tell you a percentage, not just that it's included in the program. Also, if they say anything less than 10%, there's a chance they're breaking it down annually. So ask them to clarify what the total fee would be for the entire program. Ask them exactly how much you will pay them for settling all of the accounts. So that way they give you a percentage and an actual amount. So that way you can understand how much you're going to pay them to settle your debt. Okay, number 2, the next question you can ask is, what is my estimated risk of being sued based on my actual creditor mix? They should be able to answer this. If they can't, it's just something to pause at. Okay, third and final question, ask them whether they estimate you'll have a tax obligation from the program. By no means are they tax experts either, so they may only be able to provide you with an estimate, but I'd expect them to be able to give you at least an answer that is at least as detailed as mine in this video. All right, y'all, well, thank you so much for watching. If you're still watching, thank you for sticking around until the end. I wanted to leave you a secret weapon. So my secret weapon is this. I personally, Justin, am willing to speak with you specifically to help you compare your options. options. As I'm honestly quite busy now, most of the time my team will actually be the one that speaks with people, but I want to offer you my time and speak with you specifically. So to do this, please text 833-272-3631 with the message Justin Secret Weapon. I'll have my team schedule those on my calendar directly. I will talk to you about your debt options and help you make the most informed decision. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Take care.